Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take the guesswork out of being truly informed. If you've ever looked into buying an electric vehicle, you've hit the exact problem we're tackling today. That huge frustrating gap between the advertised range and what you actually get on the road. Today, we are zeroing in on the Togg T10F EV. We've got data from a source that pushed this thing to its absolute limit, and our mission is simple. We're going to pull out the practical knowledge you need to plan a real road trip.
And we have to start by getting one thing straight. That big range number on the brochure, you need to just cross that out in your mind right now.
That is a very bold way to start. Why is that number so useless?
Because it comes from the WLTP cycle. It's a dream number, basically. It's generated in perfect lab conditions. I mean, think about it. Constant speed, no wind, no hills, and this is the big one, no air conditioning.
So it's not real-world performance. It's a theoretical maximum in a vacuum.
Exactly. The speeds are also pretty low, which avoids the biggest enemy of any EV, wind resistance. The second you're in the messy real world, that WLTP number is, well, pretty much worthless.
Which is why this source is so important.
Yeah.
They didn't do a lab test. They drove the T10F until it was, quote, begging for mercy. They wanted to know what happens on a real trip, like Istanbul to Izmir. So let's start with the car's design.
Right. Let's talk physics. The T10F is a fastback, and that's a really key difference from its SUV sibling, the T10X.
And what's the promise of that sleeker fastback shape? What should you expect?
In theory, better aerodynamics. A fastback is designed to cut through the air much cleaner. The airflow stays attached longer, creating less turbulence, less drag, and that should really matter at high speeds.
Because that's where wind resistance becomes your worst enemy.
It's your worst enemy, and it's not linear. It increases with the square of your speed, so the faster you go, the more you're fighting this invisible wall of air.
Okay, so that's the theory. But before we get to the highway, the test drivers found something pretty surprising in the city.
They did. It was, and I'm quoting here, surprisingly efficient in stop-and-go traffic. And the reason is really clear. The regenerative braking system. They described it as aggressive in a good way.
I love that phrase, aggressive in a good way. It really gets at how the car slows down the moment you lift your foot off the accelerator.
It does. And for you, the driver, it completely changes city driving. It's no longer just wasting energy, it's an opportunity. If you get good at anticipating the traffic lights, you barely even touch the brake pedal. You're just constantly feeding power back to the battery.
It almost turns it into a game. The drivers even said how satisfying it was to watch the consumption graph dip down. So the place where a gas car is at its worst, the EV is actually at its best.
It's a really positive feedback loop. The car rewards you for driving more efficiently.
But of course, that city sweet spot doesn't last forever the moment they hit the open highway.
Whoa.
That's where it gets really interesting.
It does, because that's when the consumption just spikes. They were driving like a normal person would, pinning it at 120, 130 kilometers per hour. And this is the number you need to remember. The real-world consumption was hovering around 20 to 22 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers.
20 to 22. Okay, so that's it. That's the real number for planning.
That is your gold standard planning number. It shows the T10F can handle the highway, for sure, but it's not, as the review said, exactly breaking records either. It sort of suggests that even with the better aerodynamics, the raw power needed to push through the air at high speed is just immense.
And speed is just one of the villains. We also have what you might call the silent killers of range.
The big one is climate control. It's a huge, non-negotiable drain. The review made a great point here. The driver kept the AC at a comfortable 22 degrees Celsius, saying they won't freeze just to save a few % of battery.
And that's such a critical point for anyone planning a trip. You're not going to suffer in a freezing car to get an extra 10 kilometers. Comfort is a fixed cost.
It is, and it's important to understand why it's such a drain. Heating, especially, often uses resistive heaters. Think of them like giant hair dryers running off the main battery. Cooling is usually a bit more efficient, but both will absolutely kill your range buffer if you haven't planned for it.
Right, that buffer just vanished. Which brings us to strategy. So if we accept this reality, the 2022 kilowatt-hour consumption, the climate drain, what does that mean for planning that Istanbul to Izmir trip?
It means you have to respect your usable capacity. The long-range T10F has an 88.5 kilowatt-hour battery. That's a decent size. It's a good buffer.
But the source was very clear that if you drive hard, that buffer disappears shockingly fast.
Oh, it does. If you, quote, drive like you stole it, you'll be in trouble. You have to plan your trip using that 20 to 22 kilowatt-hours per 100 kilometer figure. At that rate, your 88.5 kilowatt-hour pack gives you a maximum of around 400 kilometers. But you never, ever want to run it down to.
So your real safe driving range between stops is more like, what, 300, maybe 320 kilometers if you're driving fast. That totally changes how you approach the journey.
It forces you to be a strategist. You have to think in segments. And that brings us to the other half of the story. A big battery is great, but it doesn't matter if it takes all day to charge.
Right. How fast you can fill the tank is everything on a road trip.
Precisely. The source watched the car on a DC fast charger. It peaked at a pretty high rate, which is great, but that speed didn't last.
No, it started to throttle down. When did that happen?
It happened once we passed 80% state of charge. And this throttling is the most important charging concept you need to understand as an EV owner. It's completely normal. All EVs do it to protect the battery, but it has massive implications for your travel time.
Let's dig into that for a second. Why does the car slow down so much?
It's all about physics and heat. As the battery gets full, its internal resistance goes way up. Forcing more electricity into it at that point generates a ton of heat. And heat is the enemy of battery longevity. So the car's computer steps in and throttles the power way down to protect the pack.
So it's a safety feature, but it's a huge time waster for the driver who wants to get back on the road.
A massive time waster. That last 20% can take almost as long as the first 6. It is a total waste of your time. So the strategy is simple. Drive till you're around 20%, charge up to 80, unplug, and go. That 20 to 80 window is the sweet.
Okay, so putting it all together, the highway consumption, the climate control, the charging curve, the verdict on the T10F sounds like it's capable, but you have to be smart.
That's it exactly. The source summarized it perfect.
Well.
The T10F is capable, but you need to be a strategist. Drive smooth, use eco mode in the city to really take advantage of that region, and don't expect miracles at 130 kilometers per hour.
And there was that one final warning from the drivers that really stuck with me.
Yes. Keep an eye on that percentage because when it drops faster than you might expect. At high speed, that percentage isn't linear. The last 10% will disappear way faster than the drop from, say, 60 to 50.
Which leads us to our final thought for you to chew on today. We know the 88.5 kilowatt-hour buffer can get eaten up by aggressive driving. We know the basic rules are to drive smooth and use eco mode. But if you're already doing all that, what else can you do? What other behavioral changes can you realistically adopt to maximize the efficiency of that fastback design, especially when you hit a long hill or a strong headwind?
That is the real question, isn't it? It's about how your psychology has to shift. Are you looking to draft behind a truck for a few kilometers? Are you slowing down 5 miles before a charger? It becomes about actively optimizing your own behavior to match the physics of the car, mile by mile.
Something to think about on your next road trip. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.